Hey folks, this is JR with DIY Prepper. Welcome to the channel. I think all of us would agree that the world would be a better place if everybody was at least a little bit prepared. Now, we as preppers, of course, take things a lot further than that, but even small amounts of preparedness can make a big difference in a lot of emergency situations, especially things like natural disasters. And it seems like the US government agrees with that idea, at least to a certain point. FEMA and other organizations have lists of items that they recommend every family have to get them through different emergencies. So today we're going to be taking a look at FEMA's list, going over what it does well, and then also offering some critiques on areas that it could do better. The first thing on FEMA's list is water, specifically 1 gallon per person per day, and that's a pretty standard bare bones guideline. The cheapest and easiest way to do this would probably be to just pick up some extra cases of bottled water and rotate through those, but portable water containers like these are more durable and they'll let you store water in them for a longer period of time. Now, of course, the cream of the crop is going to be water storage barrels, and you can use those for just storing water maybe in your basement, or you can incorporate them into some sort of rainwater harvesting system. FEMA's list also includes a 3-day supply of non-perishable food, and that could include things like canned goods, peanut butter, and crackers. You could also include prepper staples like dried beans and rice along with some freeze-dried meals, but just remember that you'll need water to prepare these, so be sure to store some extra water specifically for that purpose. But one thing that I noticed was missing on their list is a way to prepare your food. Canned goods are safe to eat straight out of the can, and things like fruits, they're going to taste just fine when you do that. But most of us are probably going to at least want to heat up most other things, even if it's just to make eating it more enjoyable. Many people already have propane or butane stoves that they use for camping, and these will work great for this. But if you don't have anything like that and are short on money, then you can make something like a buddy burner or soda can stove to hold you over. The next thing on FEMA's basic disaster supplies list is a hand crank or battery operated radio. And for this, they do specify that it should be able to pick up NOAA weather frequencies and have a tone alert to let you know if there's something going on in your area. I've had this Midland ER310 for a while now, and it meets all of those criteria. It can pick up AM, FM, and NOAA frequencies, and it also has a tone alert, along with some extra features like things like a flashlight, and it can charge cell phones, although to be honest with you, it's really not the best phone charger. Another thing that they recommend is a flashlight, but as a minimum, I would recommend having a flashlight, headlamp, and LED lantern. Having that combination is just going to make things a lot easier and more convenient for you when the lights go out. While a flashlight's good for individual lighting, a headlamp will allow you to work hands-free, which would be important during a disaster. LED lanterns work much better than the other two options when you're trying to light an entire room or a larger area. And these really don't have to cost a whole lot of money. While I do recommend having a solid EDC flashlight that you keep with you at all times, having some cheaper lights set aside for things like power outages is a good idea also. This headlamp was only around 15 or 20 bucks, and it's very well suited for working close up. This is a 4-pack of lanterns that I picked up online, but you can probably find lights that are very similar to those locally for not a whole lot of money. The next thing on FEMA's list is a first aid kit, and you can either buy one that's pre-made or make it yourself. But if you go the route of making it yourself, be sure that you go beyond just the basics of things like band-aids and antiseptics. You also want to have some larger bandages and gauze pads, maybe some wraps in there as well to help you deal with those larger injuries. The next item on their list is batteries, and for these I generally prefer rechargeable ones over those that are disposable. We have a toddler in our house who burns through batteries like you would not believe, and if we were to go out and buy new ones every time one of his little devices or sound makers goes dead, we would be poor very quickly. So we picked up a decent collection of rechargeable AA, AAA, and D cells to run his stuff, along with other things like flashlights, lanterns, and radios. If you do have rechargeable batteries, then a logical next step would be to pick up a solar generator. Even smaller, less expensive ones do a good job keeping batteries like those charged up. The next thing that FEMA recommends is a whistle that you can use to signal for help. My wife and I were both drum majors when we were in high school and college, so we have Acme Thunderer whistles. That would be okay for that. I think they produce around 115 decibels, although I have seen some now that can produce up to 142 decibels, which is significantly louder. These would be useful in situations like tornadoes, and we have those where we live. So if, we get pinned in or something like that, having a really loud whistle would would give us a much better chance of being found. Another thing that they recommend is a dust mask. And I know that these have kind of got a bad rap over the past couple of years, but they're still very useful in certain situations. For instance, if there was something like an earthquake where buildings collapse, then they could help protect your lungs from particulates in the air. And they can also help protect you from particles and smoke. If you want additional protection, then a half-face respirator will protect you from everything that an N95 will, along with some other things like vapors. But if you want an even higher level of protection, then you may feel more comfortable with a gas mask. And along those same lines, the next thing on FEMA's list is plastic sheeting and duct tape. These could be used to help protect you and your family if there's some sort of widespread airborne contamination. New York City just experienced this due to the Canadian wildfires, but there are other things that can cause this as well. Things like train derailments can release harmful substances into the air. Then there's the worst case scenario of some sort of nuclear attack. Now, obviously, plastic sheeting and duct tape isn't going to protect you from a direct hit, but it could protect you if you're downwind of that and there's fallout in the air. It could prevent that from entering your home and then also, as a result, prevent you from breathing that stuff in or somehow ingesting it. You can also use those materials during winter power outages to help keep your house warm. You could take plastic sheeting over your windows to produce some sort of like greenhouse effect during the day. You could also use that tape to cover gaps, maybe in doors and windows to prevent drafts from getting in. But I would recommend using wide painter's tape like this instead of duct tape if you're concerned about your paint getting torn up and it's not some sort of world-ending thing. The next items on FEMA's list involve personal sanitation, and these include moist towelettes, garbage bags, and zip ties. And I think all of these are a good idea. If you're in a situation where water's limited, you don't want to use what little that you have on cleaning tasks. Things like moist towelettes can help keep you clean, while sanitizing wipes can be used to clean different surfaces around the house. Garbage bags, of course, are essential for managing different kinds of waste, and it's a good idea to have a backup stash in case a disaster happens when you're down to the last 2 or 3 bags in a box. Then zip ties have a wide range of uses. The next thing that they recommend having is a manual can opener, and this is one thing that a lot of people still overlook. And when selecting a can opener, try to get a good one. It may cost a little bit more, but the cheap ones tend to fall apart very quickly. And even if you do have a good one, it wouldn't hurt to have some extras just in case it wears out. And in my house, we do have a manual crank-style can opener, but we also have several backups on multi-tools. Multi-tool style can openers are easy to use once you figure them out, and they last a very long time since they don't have moving parts. The next item on FEMA's list is local maps, and this is another thing that a lot of people don't have. Cell phones and GPS have made these almost obsolete, but if we're in a situation where communication infrastructure has been knocked out by a storm or something else, then having a backup way to navigate would be useful. And the last item on the main FEMA list is a cell phone charger and battery backup. My family has a couple of Anchor battery banks that we use for charging phones and other devices, and they do work pretty well. But if you want to take it a step further, this is another area where a solar generator would be very useful, since they could keep phones and other devices running for a much longer period of time than just 1 or 2 power banks. And in addition to these supplies, there's also a list of things that the CDC recommends having, and the first one is a cloth face covering, which I will just leave right there. But there are other things like soap, hand sanitizer, and disinfecting wipes, like what I mentioned earlier. And having those on hand is a good idea because it can help prevent you from getting sick because of bad hygiene or just eating with dirty hands. And those kinds of illnesses will increase dramatically during a lot of different emergency situations. Their list also includes both prescription and non-prescription meds, and those would be good to keep in your first aid kit. For those of you that are concerned about your prescriptions, I think Jace Medical just started doing a service where they can provide, I think, up to a year of prescription meds, so that may be worth looking into if that's a concern for you. I did a video a little while back showing different over-the-counter meds that you should have on hand, and I'll link to that at the end of this video. Along those same lines, they also recommend having a backup set of prescription glasses and contact lens solution. And I think having an extra set of glasses would be a good idea even if you normally wear contacts, just because glasses can last much longer than contact lenses. I know with those you use them for like a month and you're done with them, and if you were to run out of them, that probably wouldn't be good. The next thing on their list is infant formula, bottles, diapers, wipes, and diaper rash cream. Formula in particular is something that many families overlook, especially if they're breastfeeding. But it's important to understand that there's a lot of different situations that could cause mom to not be able to produce milk. So it's always a good idea to have a backup supply of dry formula for those kinds of situations. And I'm going to take that a step further and encourage you to have anything that you need to take care of other loved ones that have specific needs. This could be elderly loved ones who aren't able to take care of themselves, maybe somebody with special dietary needs, or just people with different health conditions. They also suggest that you have some extra pet food and water for any animals that you have. You really don't want to be in a situation where maybe you're down to your last couple of scoops of food and something goes down and you're not able to get any more food for an extended period of time. The next thing on their list is cash or traveler's checks, but I would rather have cash because at least in the opening stages of a crisis, there's a lot more people out there that'll be accepting cash than other forms of payment, and that could even include private individuals who maybe have something that you need and they would be willing to accept some money for that. They also include documents like insurance policies and bank account information. Having those along with your different forms of ID could allow you to rebuild faster, like maybe you'd be able to apply for different assistance programs, or in the case of a storm, you may need to prove your identity and that you live in a certain area so you can access that. The next thing on their list is a sleeping bag or warm blanket for each member of your family. And between the two, I personally would recommend everybody have a sleeping bag just because they're good whether you're bugging in or bugging out. Another thing that they include is clothing, and this should be appropriate for your climate. I think it'd be a good idea that at the beginning of each season, go ahead and get an appropriate change of clothes. Put it in your bug out bag so it's there and it's ready to go. They also recommend having a sturdy pair of shoes, but I think boots would be a better option in a lot of cases, especially if they can provide ankle support. You may be in a situation where you're having to move over different obstacles or some rough terrain, and the last thing that you want to do during an emergency or a disaster is twist your ankle. Another thing that the CDC includes on their list and that a lot of people overlook is a fire extinguisher. Power outages, especially those that last for a few days or more, frequently see an increase in house fires. People are using things like generators, heaters, and candles and may not be exercising the best safety practices. But on top of that, I'd also recommend having some battery-operated smoke and carbon monoxide alarms along with some spare batteries for them. They also recommend having some matches in a waterproof container, but for preppers, I think having a combination of lighters, ferro rods, and matches, including stormproof matches, is the way to go. They've also included other things like feminine supplies and other hygiene-related items on their list, and I think for those, it's a good idea to have a separate stash from what you normally use, so you're not tempted up to use up your emergency supplies and then not have any when you need them. The next thing on their list is paper cups and plates, plasticware, paper towels, and mess kits. And I personally like to have these on hand because they're going to reduce the amount of water that you need to use on cleaning, and they can also just save you time. My wife, for example, she just had a surgery, and we aren't in a situation where we're really wanting to do a whole lot of dishes right now, and we are making heavy use of things like paper plates, paper bowls, and plasticware. Another thing that they include is paper and pencil, and these would be good to have if you need to do things like take notes or even play certain games if you get bored. Write in the rain pads are nice since they can be used to document critical information, and that'll remain safe even if it becomes wet. The last thing on the CDC's list is stuff to prevent boredom, and these include things like games, books, puzzles, and activities for kids. And I do think that that's one area that a lot of preppers really don't give enough attention to, because things like boredom and cabin fever, they can be really detrimental, especially in longer term situations, and if you have things to keep people's minds and hands occupied, then I think it's just going to go better overall. And I think that these are some decent starter lists. There isn't really a whole lot on there that I would say don't get, and the things that are on there would do a decent job helping people through either a short-term emergency or the opening stages of a longer-term crisis. And that really is the purpose of those lists. It isn't to get people set up to last for months, it's just to get them through little things without any help, or help them limp along for a few days until help can arrive. And for me, my biggest problem with this list is just that it doesn't go far enough. For example, it doesn't mention anything about defense, and that could be really important during a situation where there's a lot of mass confusion and panic. Also, 3 days of food and water simply isn't enough to get you through many potential situations, and it doesn't even have to be an end-of-the-world kind of thing. Hurricanes, for example, can leave people on their own for weeks, and I've even recently seen how something as routine as a thunderstorm can leave people without power for several days. This list also doesn't account for more long-term situations where water utilities may become compromised. Having things like water purification systems and the ability to, say, collect rainwater could be very useful. So while it is a decent starter list and includes some things that folks, including preppers, may overlook, I think you'd be much better off if you geared your preps to last longer term. Now, if you want to learn more about longer term survival situations and the things that you would need to get through those, then be sure to check out these videos. Thank y'all for stopping by. Y'all have a good one.